My name is Patrick Andries, and the point that I always go back to when I think about how I got started in my field is probably when I was about 12 years old. I think I was at that point when most people start thinking about what they want to do with their lives. And so the one thing that I kept coming back to is that whatever I did, I wanted to be really good at it. And the thing that I noticed is that whenever people would become really proficient at anything in their lives, whether a musician or an artist or an athlete, that they choose a single point of focus and they stay with that and work on that just day after day after day. But one of the problems that I had was that I had a lot of different interests. And so I thought, well, how could I pursue all these different interests if I have to choose one thing? I just couldn't really see myself choosing one thing and having to stick with that. So what I realized was if I chose to develop my mind, that everything else that I did in my life would improve. So that's where I think I really got the inspiration to start learning how to develop my mind and learning how to learn and improve myself so that everything else that I did would improve. And so I developed this idea that, if you master your mind, you can be the master of everything else in your life. And that's really where the inspiration began. That didn't really come into full development until later. I think when I was in college, I started attracting some friends and being attracted to some friends where we would talk about the mind, and we started getting into some paranormal abilities and things like that. And that's where I really consider my formal exploration began. But the initial thought definitely was when I was younger, and I believe firmly that we each come into this life with a life mission, something that we really want to accomplish while we're here. And for me, it's learning how to develop my mind and master all those abilities that we have that are inherent, which includes the far out realms of our intuition and also just kind of the normal everyday abilities that we use on a regular basis, and also to help other people to develop that too. So the first book is Naked in Public, Dream Symbols Revealed. And that is a book that I co-wrote with my wife, Catherine Andries. And dreams is something that is a very common topic that people ask about. And it's something that I think is a very common and natural experience that we all have. Most people can remember a dream that they've had at some point in their lives, but most people are still kind of baffled by what that really means. So we've been studying dreams for well over 20 years now and have found that those messages that we receive at night have a message that we can use throughout the day to help us improve in our lives, become more aware of things that are going on. And so as we start to delve into that, we can start to actually apply those messages to make some positive improvements in our lives. So that's really where the inspiration for that book came from. And that was a project that we worked on together. So we combined we each had about 20 years of experience. We combined our expertise together to not only create what we consider to be a really strong basic foundation of understanding dreams, how dreams work in the process, as well as starting to understand the message that dreams come in, which we call that the language of the mind, because the mind communicates in images. And so whenever you kind of observe what's happening in your mind when you're speaking, there's always an image that you have in your mind first, and then your words really describe what that is. And so that's how dreams are communicated to us, in that image form. So understanding just that basic process is the first start. But then I find that another point that's really important is to understand that we're spiritual beings too. We're not just physical beings. And so the context of the dreams really changes. For example, when we're dreaming about death, as a spiritual being, as a soul, death has a completely different context, because it isn't the end, it's just a transformation from one state to another. So the soul doesn't get all caught up in all the drama that we have when we look at death and illness and things like that. So that context changes everything when you look at the dream. So we felt that was a really important topic for people and a really good starting point for people to understand more about their spirituality and their spiritual existence and life. So as we start to interpret our dreams and understand that process, it's kind of a gateway into some of the more in-depth intuitive experiences that we have. So my second book, which I authored by myself, is called Owner's Manual for the Mind. And that book really started with a single thought, which was, what would our lives be like if we had been given an owner's manual when we were born? And it really speaks to my life mission and really encapsulates my life mission, and that was really the intention of it. It is about a 10-year project that is the culmination of all of the things that I've been teaching for the past 20 years, or a little bit more than 20 years now. And it really is designed to work for the people who have never really thought about intuitive abilities before or how the mind works or anything like that, but also to give a lot of meat and useful information to people who are more experienced also, who have been using their intuition and maybe have some more experience with meditation and visualization and things like that. So it's got some good information in there for just about everybody, but the idea again is really coming back to who are we? And who we are spiritual beings who are having this experience on earth. And as spiritual beings, it's understanding that our mind is inherently a creative mechanism. And so we are creators, and we are patterned after our Creator, just like children are the offspring of their parents. We are endowed with these same abilities. And even though our skill obviously has a lot of room for development, that's really part of the whole point of why we're here on this planet, having this life experience. We're learning how to use our minds, learning how to create. And in some ways, we could almost consider our experience here as being like children who are growing up, and so we have this kind of a smaller arena that we can work in where we can create and we can experiment without really causing a lot of harm or chaos or commotion to the people around us. So I firmly believe, as humanity progresses, as we get better at using our creative abilities, someday we will be able to join that bigger community because, I have no doubt there is a huge community out there of intelligent beings that are ready and waiting for us when we are there. When we have developed ourselves, to the point where we can play nicely, so to speak, then we'll be able to join that larger community. So that's really what the Owner's Manual for the Mind is designed for, is to give everybody just this very strong foundation that they can use to learn how their mind works, start developing their abilities, and then to be able to progress. So as long as everybody takes that time to invest in developing their abilities, they'll find that really our mind is an amazing thing. There are all kinds of incredible experiences that we can open our minds to as soon as we start developing those skills. But it's just like anything else. It's just like learning how to play the piano, learning how to play tennis. Everybody starts somewhere. And so we have to just have patience with ourselves as we're starting out. And, if you start meditating and you're not seeing results right away, realize, this is a lifestyle choice. It isn't something that happens overnight. And you just need to start taking 10 minutes, 15 minutes even in the beginning, doing it on a regular basis. Give yourself at least a year and start to see the results. So look for the results. Look for the changes, the subtle changes that are occurring in your life. And be patient, because just with it, like anything else, it takes time to develop skill. So that's really the basis of it is just to help people develop a new lifestyle in terms of being able to use their mind in everything that they do. I don't often use the term New Age, but there's definitely a movement, a change that I'm seeing. And part of the reason I don't choose to use the term New Age is because it's taken on a connotation for some people that creates kind of a sense of alienation, especially if people are still invested in their religion and things like that. They might be turned off by the term New Age and not even really consider it. So I use the term typically of spirituality or like a spiritual movement. I definitely think that there's a movement where people are reaching for and coming to terms with their essence as spiritual beings and sensing that there's something more out there than organized religion. So I try to embrace, if people are still into their religion, definitely it doesn't mean that they have to leave their religion. But I believe it's certainly beneficial for people, even within that context, to develop a new understanding, a different or deeper understanding of what it means to be a spiritual being. And for me personally, I really strive to look for that underlying spirituality that I believe is the foundation of every religion. That a religion is just a structure that we've created to be able to live as spiritual beings. But I firmly believe that we don't need that religion specifically to be a spiritual being, to live a spiritual life. So I think that's what a lot of people are moving toward. It was interesting. I saw an article probably about 10 years ago, I think, where it was talking about how people no longer identify a lot of times with just one religion. For example, people might describe themselves as a Christian Buddhist because there are some aspects of Christianity that they really relate to and want to practice in their lives, but then they find truth in other places, so they aren't just limiting themselves to one religion. So, if they find philosophies in Buddhism that really speak to them, they can incorporate those. And if they find philosophies in Christianity that speak to them, they can incorporate that. And I think that's where people are reaching out for this bigger picture of spirituality and understanding what it means to be a spiritual being and how to practice that in their lives. So for me, even though I grew up Catholic and practiced Catholicism for quite a while with my family, because that's what I grew up in, sometime after college, I started getting more into the study of metaphysics, which in general I would describe metaphysics as the study of consciousness, the study of the mind, and that extends into spirituality and understanding who we are as spiritual beings. And so with that, I started embracing just truth wherever I saw that. And so now I actually go to the Unity Church because Unity has a similar philosophy where they embrace truth wherever they find it. And, so whether it's Buddhism or Christianity, and then getting into, more of like the New Age movement or metaphysics, some of the more esoteric aspects of that, it's looking at our intuition that we have these abilities. We have the ability to connect with each other on a non-physical level. We have the ability to even travel without our physical body. That's often referred to as astral projection. And some people get into, you can go on all these great journeys and help people while you're asleep and all this stuff like that. And I think that's fine, but I also caution people not to get too distracted by all that. I think the most important lesson with astral projection, when you can leave your body and you can experience being separate from your body, then you have no doubt anymore that you continue to exist after your body dies. And, that fear of death, that sense of mortality, that this is a finite life and will come to an end, is one of the biggest fears that people have. Second, actually, to public speaking, which I don't find nearly as daunting. But when we can confront that sense of mortality, and we realize the body's going to die, yes, this life will pass, and you won't be who you are today in terms of this physical personality with this name and nationality and even gender. But when you realize that there's a deeper essence to you that goes on after this life, and then you can look at, well, this part of me goes on after this life. Maybe it even existed before this life. And you can see that continuity of our existence. You can see that, we don't just have maybe 100 years on this earth, but, we've been having experiences for thousands and thousands of years, maybe even millions or billions of years. I mean, who can really say how old the soul is or the spirit? When you look at your life and your existence in that bigger context, it changes everything. It changes your perspective, and it changes how you interact with other people. And I look at that as the foundation of this spiritual movement. And there is definitely a waking up. There are changes everywhere you can see. I mean, we can talk about these kinds of things now without any fear of being stoned or burned at the stake, and so that's a huge change, and definitely one that I'm in favor of. And now, I mean, this information is so readily available through books and CDs and on the internet. I mean, the internet really is a technological expression of our telepathy. Everything that we develop in our technology, I believe, is a reflection of the abilities of our mind. So if you look at the last 100 years, we developed telephones, we developed radios, we've developed television, and now the internet. And so it's all expressions of how our minds are becoming much more interconnected. It's easier for us to communicate with each other on a physical level, technologically, but that's all a reflection of how we're coming to become aware much more of how interconnected we all are. And people talk about the planet becoming smaller, and so a lot of that is realizing that we aren't alone, realizing that there are all these people that we can connect with. So I'm actually very optimistic, even though people talk about all these problems that are going on. And yes, there are still challenges, and there are some people that are scared of the changes, and there are some people that are dragging their feet, kicking and screaming because they don't know what is coming up in the future. They're scared about some of these changes. They are maybe uncomfortable with themselves, so they don't want people to know what they're thinking. They're scared of that increased contact. And I think that's why we have some of these pockets of resistance and violence and things still existing. But overall, when I look at humanity, I see that we are making progress. We are becoming more connected. We are becoming more spiritual. There is this core group that is helping to move everything forward. And so I do see progress. I'm very optimistic of the future, and I believe that's this new age that we're moving into. Is we're developing our intuition, and there will be a point where it'll just be common knowledge. People will understand that we're spiritual beings, even though people talk about it. Especially, when you talk about people in different religions, like Christianity, for example, most people can understand the concept of the soul, and they have this sense that you continue to exist after this life. What I found for a lot of people, and I found that for myself earlier on too, I didn't have a real life practical experience of that, even though I was taught, oh yeah, you've got this soul, and it continues after this life. But there's still this fear of death and this uncertainty. So that's why I believe it's really important for everybody to take some time in their life to invest in developing these abilities, developing their intuition. And when you can develop these skills like meditation and visualization and even more advanced skills like astral projection, it builds this confidence. Yes, I am a spiritual being. This is who I am at my core. And so things that happen in this life are much more minor in comparison. It's like that saying, don't sweat the little stuff. And remember, it's all little stuff. That's the context that things take when you can go in and day out and you come from the perspective that you're a spiritual being. You understand, no matter how bad things seem here, this is all just a flash in the pan compared to our bigger life experiences. And it's not that we don't take these things to be important, because it's actually just the opposite. It's like the closer we become to knowing that we're a spiritual being, we realize how important all these things are. So we take them, seriously, but we can also have fun with it. We don't get caught up in all the drama as much, which really helps us make better decisions overall. It helps us get along with each other and helps us make sure that the choices we're making are good for us and good for everyone else and good for the planet. So everything gets better when we have that perspective. That's been my experience. And so as we keep moving that direction, I think that's the shift that I'm hoping to help continue.